Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts.
Glad to be here for today's briefing.
So we are looking at 3 dispatches today, reported by Jed Stafford. And really, they all point to one central theme, which is how cruise travelers are facing rapidly changing vacation realities.
Right, from severe environmental disruptions to structural ship changes.
Exactly. We've got an immediate operational crisis with low water levels on the Danube and Rhine. Then we'll look at Cunard's Queen Victoria getting a modernized dry dock, and finally a pretty fascinating report on Windstar converting a polar icebreaker into a luxury Mediterranean yacht.
It's a lot of logistical movement.
It is. So whether you were packing for a cruise right now or you're just tracking the industry, we're going to break down the facts from these reports.
Yeah.
Let's start with the environmental reality hitting European river cruising right now.
Yeah, this is an immediate operational hurdle. You have an industry built on very predictable, scheduled itineraries, and it's colliding with unpredictable climate factors.
And the data here is striking. We're in the peak summer season, and Hungary's water authority reported that the Danube at Budapest is sitting just 8 centimeters above an 8-year record low.
8 centimeters? I mean, when you're dealing with commercial navigation, that is an incredibly thin margin of error.
Right, that's basically zero safety buffer for a multi-million-dollar vessel.
Oh.
And the specific gauge readings in the dispatch show how uneven the river is right now.
Yeah, the geography plays a huge role.
Up on the upper Danube in Germany, at Passau, the gauge is at a relatively stable 433 centimeters. But as you move downstream, the numbers just fall off a cliff.
They really do.
Budapest is at 70 centimeters. Comarum is at 27 centimeters. And the Gunye gauge is registering at minus 21 centimeters.
Which sounds completely alarming when you hear a negative number.
Right. I mean, reading that, you'd think minus 21 centimeters means the river's just a dry ditch. How does a steel ship float in negative water?
Well, this is where we have to clarify how river navigation gauges actually work. Because a negative reading on a gauge, it doesn't mean the riverbed is completely bone dry.
Okay, so what does it measure?
These gauges don't measure total depth from the surface to the very bottom of the river. The 0 mark on these gauges is just an arbitrary historical reference point. It's literally just a line painted on a wall, sometimes decades or centuries ago.
Ah, I see. So a negative reading just means the water surface has fallen below that specific historical average line.
Exactly. There is still water, and there is still a navigable channel or a fairway beneath the surface.
But even with that context, minus 21 centimeters still indicates severe stress on the waterway, right?
Absolutely. The fairway shrinks significantly. Skippers are forced into a very narrow dredged trench right in the middle of the river.
Leaving practically no room to pass oncoming traffic.
None at all. And it's not just the Danube. The dispatch notes that over on the Rhine, the Kalb gauge is hovering between 100 and 110 centimeters.
And the economic domino effect there is immediate. The report states that at those levels, cargo barges are forced to run well below their full loads.
Because they have to reduce their weight so they sit higher in the water. Which means, industrial suppliers suddenly need 2 or 3 barges to move the freight that one barge would usually handle.
Which creates massive supply chain bottlenecks. And sharing these shrinking, congested waterways are the cruise lines. And the market scale here is huge.
It really is.
The numbers show European river cruising grew 8% in 2024, reaching 1.5 million passengers.
Yeah, and the Cruise Association, CLIA, notes the market has expanded by 10 to 15% annually over the past decade.
With Hungary alone seeing about 600,000 of those travelers.
It's a massive economic engine for those local communities, but that volume of traffic makes a drought incredibly difficult to manage.
We're seeing the fallout in the booking data. The CEO of Mayhart Passnave, which is a Hungarian tour operator, reported an 18% drop in bookings just for July.
Right, and they had to suspend their sightseeing tours north of Budapest for a week.
So how are the major lines dealing with this? The reporting outlines a few different pivots. Avalon Waterways shifted embarkations to deeper water up in Passau.
Which is a standard mitigation tactic.
But then you have AmaWaterways, who had to completely disembark guests from the AmaMagna above Budapest, putting them onto buses and into hotels.
Yeah, that's a much more disruptive shift.
And the AmaMagna is unique, right? It's famous for being a double-width river vessel. I would assume that when the navigable channel shrinks, being twice as wide as a normal ship is a major operational liability.
Well, it's actually an interesting engineering trade-off. A wider hull spreads the displacement over a larger surface area, so the AmaMagna often has a slightly shallower draft than a standard narrow ship.
Oh, so it doesn't sink as deeply into the water?
Exactly. The depth isn't necessarily the primary issue for that specific ship. The issue is the geometry of the river itself.
Because the usable width of the fairway contracts when the water drops?
Right. So navigating a double-width ship through sharp bends or trying to squeeze past cargo barges in a shrunken channel, that becomes the real hazard.
Which explains the buses.
Hmm.
But you have to think about the consumer reality there. You pay a premium for a luxury cruise to unpack once. If you're suddenly hauling luggage onto a motor coach and checking into a hotel, that's a completely different vacation.
It shifts from a leisure cruise to an overland bus tour, essentially.
But the strategy that really stands out in the report is what Viking is doing. They use what are called ship swaps.
Yeah, this is a massive logistical maneuver.
So because Viking operates a huge fleet of virtually identical sister ships sailing in opposite directions, when they hit a dry patch, they just drive two ships to either side of the blockage.
Right, one northbound, one southbound.
Exactly. They take all the passengers from the northbound ship and all the passengers from the southbound ship, put them on buses, drive them around the shallow segment, and literally swap them.
It's a brilliant way to keep the itineraries moving.
It's like a high-stakes relay race. But the baton is hundreds of passengers and their luggage. But for this to actually work smoothly, the ships have to be completely identical, right?
They do, and that is by design. Viking built their longships to be entirely standardized.
Down to the room numbers.
Down to the room numbers, the layout, the room categories. So when you get off the bus and step onto the new ship, you walk to the exact same stateroom number, and it looks exactly the same.
That definitely minimizes the friction. But looking at the broader industry data, you have to wonder about sustainability.
The fleet growth is definitely outpacing the infrastructure.
The sources note there are 380 active river ships in Europe, with up to 60 more on order. AmaWaterways is adding the Amarudi in 2027.
And Viking expects 22 new deliveries by 2028.
Right, pushing their fleet to 114 ships. If low water is becoming a regular summer occurrence, how sustainable is this level of growth?
It forces a hard look at the operating calendar. Ship swaps are clever, but they require a lot of capital, extra fleet capacity, and they strain the local towns handling these bus transfers. Ultimately, the data suggests the industry might have to rely less on July and August as peak seasons and shift more inventory to the shoulder seasons, spring and late autumn, when water levels are just statistically more reliable.
So the environment dictates the schedule. That brings us to our next story, where shifting consumer tastes are dictating structural changes to classic hardware.
Yes, the Queen Victoria Drydock.
Exactly. Cunard is bringing the Queen Victoria in for a major modernization. And this really highlights how legacy brands balance modern expectations against traditional identities.
It's a very fine line to walk.
Let's lay out the specs first. The Queen Victoria was built in 2007. It's 294 meters long, carries 2,061 guests, and sits at 90,049 gross tons.
Right.
And just to clarify the terminology for a moment, when the dispatch says gross tons, that's not the physical weight of the ship, right?
Correct. Gross tonnage is a measurement of enclosed internal volume, not weight.
Okay, so how is that calculated?
Roughly speaking, 1 gross ton equals 100 cubic feet of enclosed space. So when a line does a major refit like this, they are aggressively looking at how every cubic foot of that 90,000 plus tonnage is generating revenue.
And the timeline they have to do this is incredibly tight. The ship goes to Damen Shiprepair in Rotterdam on October 17, 2026.
And it resumes service on November 7th.
Right, with a Southampton round trip to Zeebrugge and Cherbourg. So they're taking this massive vessel offline, making structural changes, and putting it back to work in barely 3 weeks.
The opportunity cost of a ship that size sitting empty is massive, so the updates they make have to yield an immediate return.
Which explains the focus on premium cabins. The report says they're adding 8 new Britannia staterooms. But crucially, this includes 3 Britannia Deluxe Ocean View cabins that will feature floor-to-ceiling windows.
And adding floor-to-ceiling windows to a 2007 hull is not just interior decorating.
No, you're cutting into the steel. That's serious structural engineering. But beyond the cabins, the cultural shift on board is what's really interesting.
The food and beverage updates.
Yes. They are refreshing signature spaces like the Grand Lobby, the Queen's Grill, and the Queen's Room. Now, the Queen's Room is famously traditional. It's where they host classic afternoon tea and formal gala evenings.
Very old school Cunard.
Right. But at the same time, they are adding the Pavilion Wellness Cafe, which features a plant-based menu and sustainably sourced meats.
Which brings it in line with the newer ships, the Queen Anne from 2024 and the Queen Elizabeth coming in 2025.
It does. But Katie McAllister, the president of Cunard, stated they're approaching this work with deep respect for the heritage and charm.
Right.
It makes me wonder, though, are legacy brands risking their classic identity by chasing these modern trends? Does a trendy, plant-based wellness cafe fit on a ship known for high tea and tuxedos?
Well, the baseline definition of luxury has simply shifted. 20 years ago, luxury travel was heavily focused on traditional indulgence.
Steak and martinis.
Exactly. But today, consumer data shows that across all demographics, luxury includes wellness, dietary flexibility, and sustainability. A heritage brand can't survive as a museum. It has to operate as a modern hospitality business.
So they have to cater to the loyalist who wants the classic high tea, but also ensure the younger passengers they travel with have options they actually want.
Right, and it goes back to how they use that gross tonnage we mentioned. The key is architectural separation.
What do you mean?
You don't serve the plant-based detox smoothie in the middle of the Queen's room during a gala evening. You create a distinct, separate venue like the Pavilion. It allows multiple vacation styles to coexist on the same hull without violating the core brand identity.
That makes perfect sense. So Queen Victoria is a subtle refinement of an existing brand. But our third dispatch covers a ship undergoing a total radical identity change.
This is a fascinating story about the economics of shipbuilding.
We're looking at the World Explorer, a 126-meter ship built in 2019, currently sitting at the West Sea Yard in Portugal.
And it's being converted into Windstar's Star Explorer, set to debut on December 28, 2026.
The history of this hull is wild. It was originally built for Mystic Cruises. It operated for Nico Cruises in Northern Europe, Quark Expeditions in Antarctica, and Rivages du Monde.
It was built as a heavy-duty expedition vessel.
Right, it has an Ice Class 1B notation. It's equipped with 18 Zodiacs and 2 internal loading bays.
And just to be clear, an Ice Class 1B notation means the physical skeleton of this ship is fundamentally different from a standard cruise ship.
The steel is thicker.
Yes, the hull plating is significantly thicker, the internal framing is denser, and the propulsion systems are heavily fortified so it can physically push through floating sea ice.
It's essentially a maritime tank. But Windstar is taking this tank, gutting it, and stripping away all of those rugged expedition features.
They're pulling out the Zodiacs, the cranes, the loading bays.
Exactly. And they're replacing all that rugged gear with luxury venues. They're adding the Basil and Bamboo restaurant, and they're building 2 massive 74-square-meter Horizon Owners suites, which have separate living areas and large private balconies.
And they're altering the capacity, too.
Right. It's expanding from a maximum of 172 expedition guests up to 224 guests under Windstar. And it will be operating a year-round Mediterranean program out of Venice, Civitavecchia, and Barcelona, joining its sister ship, the Starseeker, to push Windstar's fleet from 6 to 8 ships.
It's a complete geographical and demographic pivot.
It reminds me of extreme house flipping. You find a property with a solid foundation, tear out the outdated interior, put in premium fixtures, and flip it. Windstar found a practically new 2019 ice-reinforced hull, and they are gutting it to build a warm-weather luxury yacht.
That's a great way to look at it.
But why do it this way? Why go through the massive expense of tearing apart an icebreaker instead of just ordering a brand-new luxury yacht designed for the Mediterranean from scratch?
Because of the realities of shipyard schedules and supply chains. If Windstar wanted to build a custom 224-passenger ship from scratch today, they'd have to secure a build slot at a major shipyard.
Which takes time.
It takes years. They might wait 3 to 5 years just for the slot, and the capital expenditure would be much higher due to current material costs.
So buying a used Polar Explorer and converting it is basically a massive shortcut.
Exactly. It gets them to market much faster. And it also highlights the economics of the recent expedition cruise boom.
How so?
Well, a few years ago, the industry heavily capitalized on polar exploration. A lot of companies built these expensive ice-class ships, but that market is a very specific niche.
And the operating season in Antarctica is short.
Right. So Windstar is taking an asset from a niche, geographically constrained market and converting it for the highly stable, year-round luxury Mediterranean market.
And it works because of the internal volume. Once you remove 2 massive loading bays and 18 Zodiac rafts from the inside of a ship, you suddenly have thousands of cubic feet of space to build 74-square-meter suites.
Exactly. It's a highly efficient reallocation of space.
So synthesizing all 3 of these dispatches from today's brief, whether it's the drought on the Danube, Cunard updating a legacy liner or Windstar flipping an icebreaker, the overarching reality here is agility.
Absolutely. The cruise industry is intensely dynamic.
The hardware has to adapt to survive. And it leaves you with a really provocative thought to consider. If climate realities are shifting weather patterns and luxury travel trends are evolving faster than a ship's typical 30-year lifespan, are we looking at the end of highly specialized ships?
It's a valid question.
Will the cruise ships of the future need to be designed from day one as modular transformers? Instead of building a dedicated river ship or a dedicated icebreaker, maybe shipyards will just build universal hulls where luxury suites, expedition gear, or buoyancy tanks can be easily swapped in and out based on whatever the market demands at that moment.
The Star Explorer conversion certainly proves the engineering for that kind of modularity is entirely possible.
It definitely changes how you look at the architecture of these vessels. Thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.